think there were a lot of good things that were happening in the session. We'll show some clips of that. A couple of routines that were established, some expansions of those routines. He picked up on some words and was spontaneously saying some of those that we had modeled, so that was all great. There were a couple of things that were challenging in the session for all of us, and we can talk about those as well. So we can go ahead and watch the first clip. It's number 5. Yeah, perfect. And 4:15. And I'll just keep handing him the pieces or putting them in his focus so that he can continue. So put the pieces on and then we'll just imitate him and get into a routine. And it might be easier.
Oh, pizza.
Perfect. So, and then when he puts one on, you can put one on. Pizza!
Pizza.
And it's a little bit hard because he's not looking at what we're doing, so we can make sure that he's really seeing our imitation or our model. So we can hold it a little bit closer. On.
Oh, pizza.
On. Ooh, blocks. And then if he's interested in the blocks, we can bring those over. That's fine. And we'll do. Okay, so this first clip, I thought the pizza routine was one of his better routines throughout the session. You did a great job of imitating him, which I think really helped to get us into that routine. I mentioned in the clip that it was a little bit hard because he wasn't really noticing our models quite as much. He was more focused, his eyes were focused on the ceiling. So I think that was a challenge throughout the session, but in this particular clip, I think we were able to work through it because at some points he was looking down at the toys and he saw that we were imitating him, and when we needed to scaffold, he was looking at some points. So I think that was the reason why he was able to get into a routine, because he was motivated by that toy and he was looking at what we were doing.
I have a question, and it's a more general question, but relating to him. And you know, he was playing with the pizza, and then he grabbed the blocks. And I know we're supposed to sort of follow him. So okay, he grabbed the blocks. Let's play with the blocks. What I find with probably him, and then even some of my other children that I work with, is they'll grab something, but they really don't have that intent to play with it. It's just an object there that's in their path. They see it. They pick it up. So we're trying to engage, but then there's really no engagement. So, and I felt that was what was the struggling part of really with him a lot, was you were constantly, oh no, what is he gonna get? What is he gonna get? And I was almost like, oh,
Yeah.
I got frustrated with it also. So in that situation, what do you do? You know, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it really does depend on the child. I think with some children, if they do look at a toy, then we would know that they want to play with it and we can bring it over. With him, I think one strategy we could use is keeping the pizza out as well and having that as an option. So if he kind of has a fleeting moment of grabbing the blocks, we can still have the pizza and I'll still be holding it up. So if he wants to go back to that, then that would be one option.
Do you think we had too many toys for him? Like, I almost felt overwhelmed with all the toys. So I would think almost for a child like him, and I guess it's getting to know him also a little bit better, but maybe sticking to those certain toys and certain routines that he's good at, or at least we think that he can be good at.
I mean, definitely we would have to get to know him better to be able to know which toys are motivating. I had a lot of toys available because I felt like he wasn't really interested in that many of the toys that we had, so I felt like I had to keep bringing more toys in to try them out, just in case he was interested. We did spend a lot of time cleaning up the environment, I think, which in a sense was helpful. I think the mat demarcating where we could play was helpful for him, just having a couple of toys on the mat and then the rest, you know, kind of pushed to the side, and we would bring those over if we needed them. But yeah, I agree. I think once we got to know him, we would definitely just stick with a couple of motivating routines, motivating toys.
There may be times too when you can combine the, say, pizza with the blocks. But in the first session, you just don't know. And you're almost doing the assessment to figure out what it is that he can do, that he is interested in. things that work. And so I think in this case, we learned a lot about him. So based on the assessment, we were pretty confident that he had mastered some levels of combination play. And he even showed us some emerging pretend self. But so now that you've played with him, what is your estimation of where he is and what we should be doing if we're trying to get him to jointly engage with us?
So I mean, I don't have my book turned to the page, but I think we're doing some combination play, but very basic stuff. So this goes with this, and that's pretty much where I think that ends.
He didn't show any pre-symbolic, and I think we didn't, because I remember at one point I think you'd even asked to bring out, or I even asked to bring out the food with the dolls, and you said, I don't even think he's there, And the only thing when we brought the food out that he was able to open and close it, which was very object related, and that was it. So, which was interesting because prior we thought that he was able to do that, or a little bit.
Right. So it tells us a little bit about his intervention history. So a lot of times children are taught skills, and they can show you those skills on an assessment, but when you really see them in action, you realize that he hasn't really connected all the dots yet. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fill in those little gaps so that he can show us that level of play and we can sustain engagement for a period of time. So that's one issue. I think the other issue is all of the competing factors that we had going in this session. And so I think we would want to clean those up if we could. So in real life, where we have more control over our situation, we can do that. So the space, of course, we've talked about the space before. It's too large. There are probably too many things in there. There's other things in terms of the environment I think we would want to try. And we may try those today, but we may not get them on tape. So, for example, turning off all the lights. I think this is a child that just natural daylight might work better for him, because I think he's really drawn to the lights and then he gets interested in the edges, and he's very fascinated by sort of visual input. And in fact, Mom reports that he can use PECs pretty well. So that's interesting, right? So he's definitely learning visually, but actually the visual interests that he has are really competing with his ability to engage with us and in play. And so I think we have to kind of rethink what we're doing. And this is the kind of fun problem solving that we do all the time when we're trying to intervene with a child around engagement, right? So it's this process we're trying to get to. So how are we going to do that? And we have some ideas, but we'd actually like to hear some of your ideas as well.
I think one of the big differences between the assessment and the play session was the tabletop. So floor versus tabletop. I don't think he's ever had any kind of intervention on the floor. So I would wonder if there's a way to kind of go in between that and maybe provide him one of those really low chairs to the ground where he could play on the floor, but still have that sort of, this is where you sit, because he's used to that. So rather than going all the way from table in front of you, chair here, you sit here, to nothing,
right?
Have something kind of in between.
Well, or he can play on the table. So if that's where he's comfortable, children will stand at a table, they'll sit at a table. There's nothing about this intervention that says it has to be on the floor, right? It's all about the process of, you want this child to engage with people and objects, and so you're going to use what you can. So the reality is it may be a easier jump for him to go from tabletop and then gradually move him to the floor. At some point, children play outside, they play with other children, they are on the floor. So we don't sit in tables, at a table and chair all day. So eventually we're going to want to try to transition him to more naturalistic environments. But you're right, I think a good suggestion is to sort of start at the table, and you did some of that yesterday.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. We haven't talked about this, but I wanted to start him at a table just like we did with the assessments. Because I feel like he was able to sit there, he wasn't getting out of his chair, he did spontaneous play acts while he was on the table, or sitting at the table. So I think if we have that same type of environment today, and clearly we'd want to, maybe fade that out and try to get him on a little chair on the floor, like you said, eventually. Maybe not in this session if we don't have those materials. But yeah, I think I would want to start at a table today. We also talked about switching up the play level a little bit, so I want to do a little bit lower of a play level today, still some combinations, but I also want to try some lower level combinations like presentation combinations, and also maybe even some discriminant actions just because they're fun. Connie suggested using water, which I think is a great idea. Kind of, it may compete with, the ceiling, the focus on the ceiling. So we could try, rolling some things down into the water and see if that's more, oh good.
Water, that's good information. The issue about the water is that it has a lot of reflection. So, we're mindful of it. And when we talk about water, it's 2 inches of water in a tub with a ramp or something where we can sort of somehow get to that play level or, and see what we can get. And we don't actually have the right kind of materials here that we would want to have, but things like plastic boats that slide down a ramp that stack so that you have the possibility of expansion. So that's how we think about toy choice. What does this toy offer me that I can then use for expansions if we can establish a routine? So I think that's important to think about. The other, I wanted to come back to the comment about the table and chairs. So in the assessment, he was showing us some acts at a higher level. We were pleased with that, but he wasn't engaged with the experimenter. So again, maybe the closest thing for him is to now, let's use the context that he knows, and now let's work on the engagement with the person. And I think that is a really great suggestion, and it would probably be appropriate. And I believe that Mom has a cube chair with a tray that she's very happy with at home that works for her. And so if we can do the tabletop with her when we do the parent training, I think will be really important because it's the reality of what she has, and we can give her a couple of little games or strategies.
Another thing that I think is important to think about with all kids, but especially with him, is kind of the fine line between motivating toys and toys that are so highly preferred that they become, the child may become stuck on them. So on the structured play, he did some good play acts with the utensils, the kitchen set, but he got a little bit stuck and was holding the fork and the cup. So I think today I want to try to bring in some of those utensil type toys because he is motivated by them, maybe not the one that he was actually holding, just to see if he would be more interested in those types of toys. It may be a risk if he does get stuck, but we definitely have protocols to deal with those type of behaviors too. So I think that's something else that we can try today.
I have a quick question. So I noticed that when the child comes in, we kind of bring out a toy or whatever and we start playing. But I was wondering if maybe we kind of sit back and we have like 4 choices for them and see kind of if we take like 5 minutes to see what he's going to and what he's playing with longer. So if when he first gets in there and there's 4 toys on the floor and he goes and he's looking at the pizza, we know, okay, the pizza might be a higher interest of a toy for him. So we might bring this one, or because I think that when we're there, he becomes a little bit overwhelmed because he's like, oh wait, I have to do this with the person. So I think if we kind of see what his interests are without us kind of on top of him, it might be easier for him to say, okay, he's playing with this for like 2 minutes, so we know he's really interested in this toy. Let's see if we can use that toy to establish a routine.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great idea. A lot of the times what we do is ask the parent, for example, what they're interested in, so we can make sure to have motivating toys out for them. But sometimes during session they'll play with different things than the parents suggest. So I think that's a good idea to look beforehand and just see what they're interested in. And we have so many toys in our lab, so that usually does happen where the kids walk in and they'll definitely go to the motivating toys, so we'll know what to pick out.
The worry with him, I probably wouldn't leave it for 5 minutes with him, but because the worry with him is that he wanders a fair amount and he's not really paying attention to the choice. We saw that yesterday, a fair amount of wandering and kind of looking at the lights in the ceiling, and so which seemed to really draw his attention. And so if he never looks at the toys, that gave us a lot of really good information. I think with another child who wasn't so motivated by the lights, that we typically do want to see what they go to, so that's a great idea. And far fewer toys, certainly. That's good.
We can watch the next clip, I guess. Thanks.
Roadblocks are good.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That was when the blinds closed.
Did you want to start with this child now? Or?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Out! Out! So he's really learned that word just within this session. Out! Out. Out. Push.
Now, when we talk about expansion, does expansion include different words that we use associated with toys too?
Yeah, we definitely want to do a language expansion, so we would always shape his vocalization. So if he's saying out, a very clear out, then we can add on to that. Right now, I don't think it's clear enough where we would say, go out, but if he did say a very clear one, out, then we could add on a word to that. Out. And maybe we can put them in that little loop in too, so he's not just really. And then when we're taking things out, we can moderate our attention too, so we can show him. It's kind of hard to get him to look at our toy, but if we bring it very close to him, he might. Out.
So he's very object focused.
He is. Because I'm dictating him though, we are in the supported joint as long as he's noticing that I am updating him. So this is kind of a low quality supported joint, so after he takes everything out, then we can think about how to increase the quality. But I know he's saying the word and he likes this, so I'm just going with it. Out. Out. But we want to be quick though, once everything is out, you can maybe getting part of this out, right? So, quickly think of something that they can. Out. 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 So right when the last piece goes in, we can show him this, or we can hold up this and see if he goes where we should model pretty quickly, I think. Okay.
And can we model something different than out and in?
Of course, yeah, in is great too. Anything? Oh, in.
That's good.
And then that's very typical, right? So it's a brief moment.
See, and I saw that all the outs as just repetitive behavior
Uh-huh.
for him.
Uh-huh.
It was something that obviously he likes, but it's,
Yes.
I think it's just repetitive behavior.
Right.
Because some kids, you can get it out, but then they can go and put it back in or clean it however you
Yeah.
do it, and he just wanted to take everything out,
Yes.
and then once it was out, he was done. So
Yes.
to me, I see that as just
Yes.
repetitive.
Yes.
And also, when the items in the bag were running low, he started to get
He
frustrated.
got, right,
Yes.
he knew.
Yeah.
So he knew the task was almost over, and it annoyed him, right, because
Yeah,
he wanted
yeah.
more.
Good observations.
I
but-
think that's kind of why I wanted to show this clip, because it was a fine line for me because he wasn't interested in any of the toys we had. So I really wanted to capitalize on this, maybe it was repetitive behavior, to see if I could get anything going with him. The only reason I continued it was because he was picking up on the language, which was great, and he was able to expand in a sense where he would put the blocks in a different bin. So that makes me think that it's not completely repetitive behavior because he is able to be a little bit more flexible with the toys, but in a sense I do agree.
It is a fine line, and so now you have something that you can shape, right? So in this context with this child, you have to figure out what toys you can even use that are motivating, because otherwise He's not really person engaged, and he's also not really toy engaged. He is event engaged in a sense by looking at lights, by being really interested in edges. Probably hasn't really done much interaction around toys and people. And he's 2.5, and he's had a fair amount of intervention actually. He's had 6 or 7 months of 20 hours a week of ABA. And so, we have to be concerned about, next steps for him. And so how we can infuse a little bit more development and engagement work within his, basic program, I think.
I don't think we need to watch the last clip. I pretty much already talked about it. But I mean, one other thing that I was thinking about is in terms of the mom, really what we should, try to explain to her today. And one thing that I was thinking, we can talk about this later too, but I think one thing that would be easy to state to her is how to model joint attention just throughout his day. I know there are 3 kids in the family, she's very busy, it's hard for her to sit down and play with her son, and just modeling a point, even during snack time, during bath time, any kind of daily routine or play, that would be something very simple for her to do. And we know that modeling joint attention will hopefully help him initiate more joint attention, which will lead to better language. So I think for a parent like that who's very busy, just these very easy strategies would be something to pass along to her, not very time consuming for us.
And I wonder too if he likes water, what bath time is like. And if we can bring some little ideas or toys into bath time, even with the 2 boys, because they're the same age, and that might be a fun kind of shared activity, and sort of moving it from this sort of idea of parent 1 child to parent 2 children, which is the reality, and seeing if just modeling and using the other child too, who could benefit from some modeling and some simple language and appropriate toy choice. And that sort of leaving it at that. I'm mindful that we're not sort of following this child for a long period of time, so we need to be careful with recommendations and be realistic. So,
I have a question. I'm having a difficult time with the issue of not recruiting attention. Only because, we were, grabbing the toy and putting it in his line of view, and I think that is a way of recruiting attention. And I'm just wondering, is it okay? How much? I know we want to limit it, and I know we don't want to turn it into a demand. But with a child that's constantly looking around, we do need to recruit his attention if we're going to do anything, I think.
do you, in reflecting on this child, I'm wondering if he's had a lot of attention recruitment activity going on. I wonder if his attention is being recruited all day long, and if he's actually doing some of this to avoid, that may be his natural tendency, and so our natural tendency is to say, look at me, and try to get that attention. And some children really actively avoid that. And so, not knowing this child, and none of you also knowing him over this months of intervention that he's had, that would be a really important question to ask his therapist. And maybe they've come to really good strategies that work for them. But I think recruiting attention for him, I think what you were doing wasn't working particularly well in terms of trying to recruit attention. So I would like to try some other ways of getting the attention, which would be turning off the lights, one. So changing up the environment a little bit. Not putting a lot of demands for him to look, but to try to get that motivation going. So maybe water, maybe the toys with water. We have to find kind of the pleasure for him. The question is the smiling that he does a lot of the time related to the person, or is it not? And I'm not sure you guys were in the room and whether you felt that you had shared positive affect. But I think that these are basic things that we want to try to kind of get from him. And so people games might be one way to do that, as long as people aren't particularly aversive to him and demanding from him.
Right, when we
Yeah, I
He
know.
cried with you
It
when you
didn't work very
sang.
He
well.
does love, and I know this because him and his brother love it. He loves like the jumping games and what's the
Ring around the rosy?
Ring around the rosy. I'm like
Uh-huh.
merry-go-round around. Ring around the rosy. He really likes those type of games. But I do have. You just said something, and I just realized with Tristan, which is child 1. When I first started with him, I noticed that he would not. He would just he would see me and he would look the other way and kind of. And all of a sudden, after we started our routine, I realized, this kid has a lot of eye contact with me. How did this happen? And I think it was because he was used to seeing people, and he was used to having all these demands placed on him. So he would just look the other way and turn his head. Literally, if I was here, he would look the other way so that I wouldn't be able to, or he would avoid me placing a demand on him.
And so you weren't asking him to look at you.
No.
Yeah, and so I think, for some kids that works really well and you kind of move on, and for other kids that is a real aversive. So, again, I think this is where you have to think of some behavioral strategies that you would normally use. I think it's very important to have behavioral background and understanding how to use those strategies, but you have to infuse it with a developmental approach and developmental knowledge. So these are really young kids, first of all, chronologically. They're even younger developmentally. So the first child is very young. He's an infant in terms of his development. So we have to think about that and what those goals are. And I think even with the second child, I would want to get a better sense of how much language he's understanding, because it's not clear to me. So if we were in the lab and he was in a study, we would have done a lot more testing. We would have done some cognitive and language testing. We would have done an imitation task as well to find out where he is. So, I think we have kind of limited knowledge about him, and we're going to change it up today. You're going to see kids that are at this developmental level, and so it's pretty important for you to sort of have some strategies to work with them. These are kids that aren't very often in studies, and so the data that we have isn't probably great in terms of understanding how far you can move them. I feel confident that with both children we could improve their engagement, and we could improve sort of joint attention or requesting skills. We may not change in a short period of time, let's say 10 weeks, we may not change play level for either of these little guys, but I think if we had them over a year or 2 years, we would certainly see lots of progress. But in a short period, and I think of things in about a 3-month chunk. So play level wouldn't be a goal that I would try to improve in 3 months with these kiddos, but I would try to improve engagement, joint attention, and probably with the second child some words and language. Mm-hmm. And actually we might improve his play level to be more solid with people.